Yo, this is the real deal. We back, baby, and better than ever.
Better than ever.
How's everybody doing?
Super special awesome as always.
As always.
Enjoying the cool weather.
Yikes.
Crazy.
I love it. No, not crazy. This is expected. We've been having crazy weather. It was 70 in like March. That's crazy. That's weird. Who does that?
Japan, you have such dimmer light right now because it's like blue, green, white. It feels like day light.
Look, it's the environment, and it's really just a reflection of my screens. But it's okay. Look, we're not gonna move into that. We're just gonna sit there and enjoy the ambiance.
Okay.
Look. I'll keep that in mind. Like teal is the good color. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So
and also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have a guest. I was gonna do it because I was waiting for you to do it.
Yeah, no,
I was talking about
you do it.
Extra person we just have there. There's a whole person here, but we're not gonna mention it. Yeah, like we have a guest, the first guest. To my knowledge.
The first guest. There we go.
Ooh.
Where's your soundboard?
Oh, me? No, it's not for this. This isn't worth it. Look. No, this isn't worth it.
Wow.
Look. Yeah.
We can't get a drum roll?
No. There you go.
There. Right now.
Yeah. Don't force me to use the sounds. I use the sounds I want to when I feel it's necessary.
The dramatics, my God.
So dramatic.
Here we go.
Look, I demand freedom.
Okay, Nia, tell us about yourself, Nia.
Yeah. Yes, go. Do the thing.
Hi. Right, yeah, hi. I feel like I'm at work, at a new meeting. Like, hello, everyone. My name's Nia Evans. My pronouns are she, her. Like, that's how I usually start off. But, I've, been friends with Bracy for years and Daquan for years and actually used to be Allie's teacher. Fun fact. So, know the crew, love the crew, love hanging out with new people. So, that's good times.
Good times.
Look at that. Yeah. And now we're here.
Hanging. I know, that's so weird that we all have this weird connection. Which is part of the reason why I chose Nia to be first.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. I get it now. It all tracks.
Now, it's almost like we're an intimate family.
Oh my God. What a segue.
I think we're going to do it.
I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna find a way to segue that hard every single episode. Like that's just gonna.
This is the sick game you play. It's not fun.
At the end of
just talk about things normally.
At the end of the season, I'm gonna put a reel together of all of my segues.
Alright. Well, yeah, the segue. Let's continue.
Okay, so today we are talking about intimacy and vulnerability. Ooh la la. Ooh wow wow jeans. I don't know. Y'all probably don't know where that's from, huh?
No, I don't.
It's okay. My wife and kids, but that's okay. So we're talking about intimacy and vulnerability. Does anybody want to take a shot in the dark on what their definitions are for intimacy and vulnerability before we get into the actual discussion? I'm gonna ask.
I feel like this is the guest time.
I'm gonna ask the Google A.
The Google A. We don't need that. Google never steered us in the right direction. They just say words. But yeah, nah. I don't have good definitions for these.
Yeah, we can kind of say our own definitions, but I would be interested to see how it, relates or connects to what Google A has to say.
Yeah.
But for me, I guess, vulnerability is that willingness to like open up and share parts of you that would allow you to potentially like get hurt or, connect on a deeper level. I guess that deeper connection would be intimacy, to keep it pretty short.
I like that.
Ooh.
So they're connected.
I like that too.
Anybody else wanna?
Okay. I want to chime in because I'm thinking a little bit differently. Like
Okay.
now that I've had that definition. So I agree that vulnerability is opening up to someone, but I think it's opening up in a specific way because of a conversation I just had. I think vulnerability is opening up and talking about things that you like. I think it's not vulnerable. Like, and I think that you can have intimacy with like. It can be someone you've been vulnerable with. I think you can have an intimate moment with like almost anybody.
Allie, wait, did Allie cut out for everybody else or just me?
She started to cut out, but
No!
she came
I
back.
was trying to
Ah.
catch you.
Dang, Allie. I bet you it was so good too. Allie, you better not be using your
No,
computer
okay, hold
again.
I'm not.
Eesh.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. You
Yes,
still cutting
kinda.
out.
How about now?
It's
Allie,
better now, it seems.
Allie needs a new phone plan.
Brutal.
Dang, you got that one, huh? Your connection connected at the wrong time.
Mm.
Can you hear me now? Am I with you?
Yeah, you're with us.
Yeah, you're
What's the last thing you heard? Because I've been here for all of it.
The
It's not
second
frozen
you
on mine.
started talking, you started breaking up. So just
No.
give it to us one more time.
I'm so
just do the
Okay,
run back. It's
so-
okay.
Okay, so vulnerability to me is talking about things that you like, not things you don't like. I think it's so much easier to like say things you don't like, but it becomes vulnerable when you say like, "Oh, I do like this." And I don't think that you need to have that vulnerability in order to be intimate with someone. I feel like I've had intimate moments with like almost strangers before.
That's what I was going to do. I was going to say that vulnerability and intimacy wouldn't. I don't know, we'll get into it. You don't need to be vulnerable to be intimate with someone, but vulnerable, I would disagree with what Ali said. Vulnerable inherently requires, I wouldn't even say something you like. It's about expressing who you are without filter, or when we refer in terms of like a relationship context, it's who you are without filter. It's about expressing this parts of you that you probably don't necessarily want to express.
So like authenticity-ish?
It's not necessarily authenticity. It's more so there is a part of you that typically people don't express. Keeping that part inside is typically what is what I would say most people do. You don't just go out and dump your entire self to someone. It's about expressing those parts of you that you normally don't express to someone is what I would consider vulnerable. And versus intimacy is more about just the closeness of the relationship you have with that.
Okay.
Like how, not necessarily deep, yeah, I guess kind of deep a moment you have.
Okay, I dig it.
I think I actually agree with what you're saying. This is the first time ever.
What? Wow.
Okay. All right, I guess. I'm happy that this happened. Congratulations.
I'm being vulnerable right now.
No,
I like
it's okay. All right. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was interesting. I would say, Alex, your comment about things that you like being vulnerable. I see what you're saying because some people try to create connections by like hating on the same person or something like that. But I think it's like kind of like what Daquan was saying, that it is a step further of like you're sharing things that like you can truly feel like you're putting yourself on the line kind of thing. Like, that this person could like expose you or like, really put yourself out there if they wanted to. And I think that's the piece of vulnerability. And it's also like kind of to get at what Bracy was saying with the authenticity. It's like and to what Daquan said, you're showing your true self, your whole self. So you're also putting that on the line and like, saying like, are you going to accept this or not? And depending on your own securities, you know, you're okay with that or not when you walk away from the situation. But you know, you're really saying like, this is who I am, take it or leave it, and that's where you are truly vulnerable.
Vulnerable is to be open, while intimate is to be close. Is the way I would think of it.
We're connected, because to what Allie said, it's like you don't. I would agree that you don't have to be close to a person to be able to have an intimate moment.
Fair.
But I don't know if they're necessarily like, you know, there's different types of intimacy, so I think that's what's kind of getting at play there. But it's also like, you know, what it depends on what you're looking for. But they're just not as sustainable. Like they're kind of those like one-off moments, but they're not really, you know, a sustained intimate relationship or something like that.
Nice.
That's a good way to put it. A sustained intimate relationship. I like that.
The Google says that vulnerability is a noun, in case you were wondering, in case nobody knew that. The quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. That is the number one definition.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
It's rooted in pain or suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is actually really fascinating. It's one of the reasons that I don't like Brene Brown's definition of vulnerability. Because it's rooted in pain.
Well, yes, but let's take the thing. You never use the word vulnerable in a situation where it's not about not being attacked.
Yeah. Well, inherently, let's think about vulnerable from like an engineering perspective. Like, if you show somebody a house and then you say, here's the vulnerable joist, that means that if you break that joist, the house collapses. So this is the vulnerable joist. So that's the joist you have to protect or reinforce, or however you want to put it. And I think this functions the same way, is that in order to be vulnerable, you have to put yourself in a place where you are exposed to danger or harm. And the only issue that I have with that is that like a psychopath can't be vulnerable. Like they could never be vulnerable. If you don't have the emotional capacity to feel pain,
that's not necessarily true.
From exposing yourself, then there's no way to be vulnerable.
It's not about being pain from exposing yourself, or it's not even about the person feeling the pain. It's about the fact that they can be attacked from this angle. Yeah, psychopath can be vulnerable, but it's not.
But
let's put it this way.
But see, when you're talking about attacked, you're like there's pain associated with being attacked.
No, there's not inherently pain with being well, I guess sure you can say there's pain, but it's not necessarily like
I don't have a problem with vulnerability, and I don't even want to because now we getting too deep into the weeds of vulnerability. But that's just my personal quorum, I guess, with the idea and the concept of vulnerability. What do you say, Allie?
I think that psychopaths, I don't even like that word. Psychopaths can be vulnerable, but maybe I think you're right, like not emotionally the same as someone else would be.
Okay. So, let's talk about
Quan doesn't want to move on.
Hey, I let it ride. Did I not let it ride? I was like, we'll get to it later, or if not, whatever. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to it later. Let's talk about society and the concept. How vulnerability is used in society and how we're socialized to use vulnerability. Ooh, look at all those thinking minds.
Society basically teaches people to just sit there and never allow themselves to be vulnerable unless you can do it in a way which it doesn't matter. You are taught that don't put yourself out there because it could be bad and wait to find out whether or not it's okay to be vulnerable. I feel like that is the majority of like the common sense for vulnerability, at least.
I feel like okay. This goes into what you and I were talking about earlier last week of how I feel like I've been really mean to everybody I've been meeting, and I haven't been vulnerable at all to anybody. And I was talking to my cousin about this, and she doesn't think that I'm mean. She thinks that I have a really high, like, entry threshold into my life. So unless like someone I meet meets that high threshold, then they don't have entry. It's not about me being mean or vulnerable.
I can see that. That makes sense.
That's interesting. I think, when it comes to society and vulnerability, I kind of think about it two different ways. I think, one, we're really taught that it's safe to be vulnerable in romantic relationships, but not necessarily really anywhere else. Unless you have, like, good friendships, but even sometimes, like, I don't know, it just depends on, like, your friend group or whatever and how vulnerable you actually are able to get with friends. And then, what was the other thing? Maybe lost my train of thought, but it's just, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me. It's like it's interesting the different spaces that vulnerability shows up and where it's like accepted and where it's not accepted, where it's okay to be vulnerable and where it's not, and like that can influence different relationships and the ways you show up in those relationships.
Here's an interesting thought really quick. This is something that I've heard from a different person in a different podcast, and they were talking about when does vulnerability become tough skin, and the question that they asked essentially was, and they weren't like for or against vulnerability. I think it was just part of the conversation. They were talking about if a person is overly vulnerable with every person that they encounter, does that create tough skin? Like essentially, do you become authentically yourself in every situation? And then does that inherently take away your vulnerability? Because you're no longer vulnerable because you're allowing yourself to constantly be exposed. So it's almost like you're reinforcing your authentic self. And does that inherently make you not vulnerable anymore? And this is something that I thought about and I was like, that is really fascinating. Like I don't actually have an answer to that.
And it's going to loop back to the thing. I feel that yes, when you are basically when you're basically putting yourself out there all the time and being authentic, it makes you more vulnerable. That's just a fact. The ways that people can attack you and do things is numerous. Like they can sit there, any little thing, any little like flaw that people can consider, they can come and attack you on. You just start to not care. You're just kind of like shrug your shoulders and move on. And that's, you're still vulnerable. It's not that you're not able to be attacked. It's just that the attack doesn't do anything. If you get what I'm saying.
Interesting. So if we're using like the house analogy, what you're saying is the joist is exposed and people can walk up to it and hit it and punch it and stab it. It's just not budging. And that is still being vulnerable, even though it's not interesting. Even though it's not flimsy or like, it's almost like it's reinforcing the joist in a way.
To me, that is what strength is.
But like, not covering
that's how
it
I view. But yeah, that's how I view strength. Strength is being vulnerable, but yet still not succumbing to that pain. If you get what I'm saying.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, the other thing I was gonna mention too is like, just because you're being vulnerable and exposing yourself doesn't mean that you necessarily have like the emotional capacity or emotional intelligence to handle things that might come back towards you. So you can be spilling your guts to everybody and then still be hurt when somebody like exposes you or uses that information against you. Like, I don't think they're necessarily one and the same. Like, I think either outcome could be a possibility of somebody just opening themselves up to everyone. Like, you can still definitely get hurt. You're not gonna just like automatically become this person that builds that tough skin up to be like, oh yeah, I don't care. Like, it can actually do, you know, more damage.
It can do the opposite, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Allie, any thoughts?
No. I agree. I mean, just because you get like, if I keep wearing the color purple, but people don't get the color purple, I'm not wearing the color purple. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's what you're saying. Like, if I'm being vulnerable just because someone doesn't like accept my vulnerability doesn't mean I'm not being vulnerable. But like, to me, all I can think of is like, why would I be vulnerable in not great situations where I would have to have like, I would have to develop thick skin? Like, that doesn't feel like self-preservation. And I'm having a hard time like thinking to that like that.
It's a double-edged sword. It's basically the only way to get to this point is to be vulnerable and do it. You just don't know whether or not you have the ability to live through it. The only way to figure it out is to go through it. And then once you go through it, it's like, okay, I went through it, I'm fine, everything's cool. Or I went through it, it was the worst experience in my life and I can't do it. But I guess you can also have the whole experience of, oh snap. You can also have the whole experience of, like Nia was saying, where you're vulnerable, but you keep getting hurt, and you keep putting yourself out there, and you keep getting hurt, and you keep putting yourself out there, and you keep getting hurt.
Wow, that's interesting. I was listening to I always just want to call him Childish Gambino. Yeah, Donald Glover. I was listening to Donald Glover, and he was talking about his projects over the years, and he mentioned how all of his projects when he started writing in college and was picked up by SNL. And he said he said when he started, like everything he was exposed to, he just assumed that's how Hollywood worked. And so, and then he went in the Community and all of these other projects. And he said the entire time he was just doing it and having fun. And he didn't know, he kept thinking, people are going to hate this. But then people kept liking it. And then he would do another project and he'd be like, people are going to hate this. And then people would like it. And he said over the years, he just kept, it kept reinforcing this concept that he had in his mind to just do stuff and have fun with it, you know, and just believe in what you're doing. And people have like, he's done so many projects where he was pretty sure people were gonna hate it, or it was gonna get, you know, it was gonna get canceled, or, you know, whatever. And then, but he would do it, and then people would love it. And then so he was just kind of like baffled by this idea of like, okay, just like keep being me and doing me and like enjoying doing me, and then we'll see what happens. And so I think that's kind of like the kind of like, I don't know, going back and forth between what Ali and Daquan was saying. Nia, you mentioned relationships. How do you think vulnerability plays a role? I guess we can talk about romantic relationships. That's easy. But any relationship.
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of tie relationships to what the comment you just made, and what came up for me is like, what you're allowed to be vulnerable about and what you're not allowed to be vulnerable about. So like Donald Glover, like if people didn't like his work, like obviously, you know, he would just continue and like try to figure out a different way. But like when it comes to things about you as a person, like, you know, things you struggle with, things that you don't want other people to know about, when you're showing up in relationships, like when you decide or how you decide to bring those things up in relationships, I think speaks a lot to, who you are as a person, but also like can impact the relationship itself. So, kind of a bit of an example. I've personally been in relationships, and I've heard of other folks that have been in relationships where like one of the partner is like hiding like immense secrets, like just huge, giant secrets, and it's like I'm just like, every time this comes up, it's like why is it that people can come into relationships, feeling like they're being truly vulnerable, saying that they're in this, like I said earlier, this sustainably intimate connection with somebody. Yet hiding these really giant things, and it's like that to me is just like a really interesting question of like, what does vulnerability mean to different people, and like that's why it was really interesting to hear everybody's perspectives, because it's like you're claiming to be vulnerable, which is what is the foundation of this intimate relationship. You've been vulnerable with each other, you're connecting or whatever. Like, why are some things just always left in the closet, regardless of how safe you feel in these relationships or whatever the case may be? So
that's a good question.
That kind of is what came up for me.
Okay, let me just ask this really quick. Do you think that a person, when they enter a relationship, should be like if we're talking about vulnerability from what my favorite color is all the way to like deepest, darkest secrets, I'm a closet, fill in the blank. That's at like 100%. What level of vulnerability do you think a person should be when they enter let's do romantic relationship, because that's easy. When they start the romantic relationship, so like we talking, not dating yet, but like talking, flirting, then dating, then like girlfriend, boyfriend, then like engaged, then married with kids, and then married for like a decade. Like what level of vulnerability do you think they should have, like from phase to phase? And anybody can chime in.
Me personally, I feel like you should be 100% vulnerable.
Wow, that's a lot.
Disagree.
Yeah.
Disagree.
That's
a
lot.
People disagree, but when it comes down to it, the whole point of vulnerability is saying, "Oh, I don't want to put out this thing of myself out there." Me personally, I personally believe in trying to do that. I try to sit there and say, I'm constantly going to do this thing. Do I do it all the time? No. But I feel like the goal should be to get to that point. I feel like that's what we should be able to be at.
From jump.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I gotta jump in. So I think to your point, Daquan, I think what you're describing to me, it sounds almost like integrity, like showing up, the same, like as who you actually are in like all situations. But I think for me, the difference in being vulnerable is like, I still don't know who you are. So I'm gonna show up as me and like, not gonna like try to put on a front or anything like that. But like, 'cause I don't know this other person, I'm not about to just let them know about like, these vulnerable things that therefore could be used and attacked and then be painful towards me. Like, I'm just not gonna do that.
And my perspective on that is that my goal is to be strong enough so that doesn't matter. Like we referenced before, I want to be basically, you can attack me all you want, but because I'll just let you attack me, because there's no sense of sitting there and waiting for you to figure this stuff out. These things are true about me. This is how I feel. This is how I am. I'll let you know this. And if you feel like you want to attack me for it, fine. That just lets me know something immediately instead of me waiting and wasting time and finding this out later.
It's about efficiency. Okay, I got a different question. It's slightly the same, but different. Like, I took a deep breath.
Those jelly beans.
I know the jelly bean went straight down my throat.
Beans, bro. See, look at it. Jelly beans bad. They tried to kill you.
Jelly beans
just abandon
season.
the jelly beans. Choose another candy. The jelly beans don't like you. They want you gone.
Dang, now I gotta hope I didn't lose my train of
Oh, you lost that.
Come on, shake.
Come on, get it. Cop on there. Be the Kentucky. Chugga, 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 choo, choo.
Yeah, Allie.
Did you? Okay, so I have about vulnerability and because I think that is so different than a relationship, of course. And what I've noticed is that when I'm working with like an older generation, there's no vulnerability. If it is, it's like we connect on things we don't like what I mentioned earlier. But now I feel like the youngest generation in the workforce, it's like almost the opposite. It's like, yeah, I have this mental illness and I was sleeping while I was working from home because I really needed a power nap, but then like this and that, and it's like that straight up.
That's
like, this is what my
so
life is like.
funny.
And with it.
I was literally talking to somebody today about that.
Yeah, and I really like that. I feel like that's so much easier to connect with. There's so much less pressure. And once you know, like, the person you're dealing with in, like, that work environment, like, you can have, like, such a better work relationship and be so much more successful in whatever your goal is with them.
So this was my question, because it goes in line with that. When and how do you tell people about these vulnerable things? Because you can't just enter a relationship and then be like...
And just dump.
Yeah, and just be like, hey, so I just want to let you know, like, I like making out with dogs. Like, it's just a thing. It's just a thing that I just need to tell you from the start before we get into this relationship so that, you know, we can succeed in life. Like, every now and then I see a dog and I just... And, like, do you tell a person that at the start? Or do you wait till they catch you making out with a dog? Like, that's the question.
No.
Like, how do you bring it up?
I feel like if you have this situation and it's this strong, you gotta. This is one of those like, okay, look, there's a specific site. I'm trying to skip it. I'm trying to be like, look, from jump, wow, this is what I'm about. Are you okay with this? Yes, no, all right, moving on.
Interesting. I'm gonna pull up my notes from class.
Well, the other piece I think that is important about it is like, I think there's a period where you have to figure out if this is somebody that you care for them to know this about you anyway. You know, like you're still, again, like I don't know this person, so like maybe from jump I'm thinking, oh, you know, they're cute, they're interesting or whatever, so I want to get to know them. But just because I think somebody's cute doesn't mean I want to expose the fact that I like making out with dogs. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like that, you know, jumping from jump, I still don't agree that people actually do that to Quan. Like, I don't think you actually.
Oh, no. Wait, people actually just present themselves 100%? Like, I 100% know that that's a thing. I've experienced it, and it's interesting. It's really interesting. It just skips through a lot of stuff. Now, true, it happened on accident. It wasn't like, oh, this was the thought. I'm planning on it. But, like, the moment you become, like, the experience I had, I just started talking about things. For me, and this is why it's kind of hard. For me, it wasn't, I didn't even consider myself being vulnerable. I was just explaining who I am. Like, it was literally on a dare. I was like, no one just tells their life story. And I was like, bet, cool. And I just went off and just told everything, like all the important things in my life. And it was like, that person felt like, oh goodness, I was explaining something a lot to them. And I was like, no, it's just like, you need to understand these facts in order to understand me. And that's how I view it. I understand it's a vulnerability, but it's one of those things where my vulnerabilities are me. I am okay with expressing myself because that's the point of me building this relationship. Any relationship, not even just romantic. My whole point is to saying, hey, this is who I am. I would like to know who you are. Can we, and if we cool, then let's hang out and have fun. That inherent need for vulnerability is there, and I understand the pain, and that's kind of what it is. It's like, I understand that there's pain there, but I don't care about the pain because I'm willing to risk it for the possible rewards that I get.
That's only after you've identified that there's rewards to be reaped from the interaction. Yes,
you can't figure that out from before then. The only way to figure that out is to be vulnerable. you only way you can even know what those rewards are is to put yourself out there anyway. What we're arguing isn't about whether or not we're going to be vulnerable. It's about how vulnerable are we going to be.
Yeah, and when. How vulnerable and when is really the conversation, because
it's not when. You're always going to be vulnerable. It's just about, I guess it's about
I was about to say
vulnerability over time.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's vulnerability over time, because it's like when is like, oh, you cannot be vulnerable. I'm like, no, you're going to be vulnerable. And let's take Bracey's making out with dog things. If making out with dogs thing is a very important part of my life, then you just gotta do it. You gotta tell them. If this is something I like and I'm like, yo, I'm about to just make out with this dog, for me, the thought isn't going to be like, oh, how do I bring this up in the conversation? It's just going to be like,
what if you forget?
Yeah, I'm going to make out this dog when this.
What if you enter a relationship with a person and you like, man, they're kind of fun and da 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 da, and then you go home and you make out with a dog, and then you come back and hang out with them again, and you're just not thinking about it. You're not like, man, I can't wait to go home and make out with that dog. You're like, man, they're so fun. And then one day y'all hang out together and you see a dog and you're like, wow, look, that's a hot dog. I would love to make out with that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, what? Why didn't you tell me sooner? It's like, well, I didn't think about it sooner.
It didn't come up, but now it came up, and yeah, this is what I'm about.
This example is getting a little hard for me to follow.
I mean, it's a good example, though.
It's an extreme example. But it makes it obvious.
All the time.
What do you mean put up with? We're making things so clear. We're just going straight to the moon.
No, this is a great example, because making out with dogs is not. I think it's something that most people probably frown at, I guess, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not pedophilia.
I don't think most people frown at it. I think a lot of people make out with dogs, bro. Honestly.
But what I'm saying is like, that's something that somebody would be like, this is my deepest, darkest secret, is that I like to make out with dogs. Can we agree with that?
Okay, so how about this though? How about this? Oh, go ahead, Allie. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. So what if it's something that is not necessarily, like, it's a vulnerability, something you want to share, but it's something that you are ashamed of. So it's not something that you're just like, well, you just found out.
Ooh,
this is who I am. This is
that's
about me.
good.
You know, like, so I don't really care, and we can just continue to move on. But what if it's something that you're like, look,
that's good.
I'm struggling with this. So how do you address that type of conversation?
That's great.
Well, and then
you just hide it and bury it. Get a deep shovel.
Now, here's the thing. That is exactly what Daquan does. It's like, I don't like this aspect of myself. This doesn't exist. I'm not even acknowledging it in my own mind. What do you bring up? What? Vulnerable? How can I be vulnerable about something that doesn't exist? It was weird. But to the actual honest point is, my solution for that is more so you have to be okay with yourself. That's my always thing is always going to be about, yes, I'm ashamed of this, but that's kind of my goal is to no longer be ashamed of this or get to a point where I can talk about it. Because if I'm not willing to talk, no, not even to a point. If I'm not willing to talk about this, then why am I doing it? I think if I'm personally ashamed about it, then I should stop. Or I'm going to accept it and be like, yeah, this is what I'm about.
You just gave me a really great thought. I'm saying it because I know if I say it, it'll stick in my brain. Can you be? This is a question, but I think I'm gonna meditate on this a little bit. Can you be vulnerable about something you're shameful about if you haven't overcome the shame yet? Or should you be vulnerable about something? Like, let's use the same analogy. You are ashamed of being attracted to dogs or wanting to make out with dogs. So you don't share it. And is it wrong to not share it because you're trying? Like, let's say it's like I'm shameful of it and I want to overcome it, but I haven't overcome it yet. Is it fair for me to not share it if it's something that I'm actively trying to work on? Or should you share it and say, but it's something I'm trying to work on? And is there a limit? Is there a certain point where it's like, nah, that's too much? Like I think you need to just you overcome your dog issue, and then you can come back to me maybe.
I think a couple of things. I think silence is where like shame like breeds, and so the more that you don't speak about it, the more like shame surrounds it.
Mhm.
So vocal about it allows a community to be built around you that can lift you up or has similar struggles. But I think that it does take a lot of like strength to say, hey, what we're talking about is really vulnerable for me, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it anymore. And then the point of that, of being able to say that, though, is knowing the person on the receiving end is going to respect that and be like, oh, okay, I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable, let's move on. And like, it's as easy as that sentence right there to like de-escalate a situation.
That's fair.
Yeah. Allie, I think that's a really good point. Oh, sorry, Dakota, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna sit there and say that even with that, I feel like you still have to. I don't know. Like, no matter what the situation, be vulnerable, even though how shameful you feel about something. It is one of those things, like you said, if you don't, then it just adds on to the shame. And two, it's the only way for you to kind of like move forward.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
I think what Allie was saying is like the way you can still talk about it, even if you're not, fully through it yet. So like, as much as we want everybody to be at the point where they're like, "Yep, I'm talking about this. I need to work on this, etc., etc." If they're not at the point, I think it's like the best balance of like not leaving someone in the dark, but saying like, "Hey, like I'm not ready to talk about this, but I do need you to know that this is a vulnerable area for me." And like, that can be a way to kind of like be in the middle, talk about it, acknowledge it, but like, not push yourself to the point where you're like, bawling on somebody's couch.
Interesting.
Like,
that's
really
very fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be vulnerable with y'all for a second, even though I don't believe in that word. There was a conversation that I had with Candace at one point, and I told her there were some things that I'm going to die and take to the grave with me. And I was like, if you're okay with that, like that was my point, quote unquote, vulnerable, me being vulnerable. Like I was like, no, there's like 3 things that I'm just not gonna tell you about myself because they are related to like maybe I guess shame, not really shame, but shame. Like it's more so less about shame and more about public image. Like I was like, I would rather just die and not tell anybody these 3 things, and I'm telling you that so that you know, and that's me being vulnerable with you. I'm not gonna tell you what those things are. And that was a hard conversation. I mean, you guys all know Candace for the most part, and so that was a conversation we had earlier in our relationship, but it was very much like a hard conversation to have because it was like, okay, so it's almost like I dangled a carrot over her head and was like, this thing, I'm not gonna let you have it, but I just want you to know that I have it. I'm gonna die with it too, but I just want you to know that I do have it. It's in my back pocket. So just bury me when I die with it.
Crazy, was this before or after y'all were already married?
It was before we got married.
Okay, so I think in that case, it's fair because it gives the person the opportunity to be like, I recognize that this is who this person is as a person. Like they have already committed as an individual that they are never going to tell anyone in their life about this. So then, that just gives that person an opportunity to be able to say like, okay, in my most like romantic, intimate, vulnerable relationship, because that's what society tells us romantic relationships are supposed to be. But like, in this most intimate relationship, I have to decide, or Candace had to decide as the person who's going to be your partner, is this something I can live with, knowing that this is who this person is, and they're always going to hold these things from me. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you just have to at least say it to give the person the opportunity to be like, okay, fine, you can have a whole closet if you want to. I'm not even going to look in there.
It's just dogs all over the place.
look, I don't gotta involve me. You know, some people could have that mentality. Other people are like, no, I need to know everything about you.
Interesting.
And you know, and it's just a matter of like who you are and what you want out of your relationships.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, no, if you tell me that, I'll be like, all right, cool, but nah, I can't do it. Like, and it's specifically because of who I am. I'm like, look, this for me, how I view it is, this is the deal. I'm gonna tell you everything. If you don't want to know, don't ask me.
That's a lot.
But if you ask me, that's how my relationship with all of my friends and everyone who knows me is, if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you my answer. Do not ask me questions you don't want to hear the answer to. Because
I'm gonna take that as a challenge, but not on a public podcast.
yeah. Like, not here, no. Here's the thing, because don't do it, because I'll do it, and I'll be like, look, why'd you make me do this? Like, now we're here.
Okay, wait. I want to. This has been kind of out of my brain. Talked about it. I had a date last week, and I was talking to this man, and he was like, talking. I mean, like, laying it all out there.
Barf.
And by the date, like, I was like,
is that what he sounded like?
For, like, feeling comfortable.
Okay, good.
No, I was feeling like, listen, thank you so much for telling me about all these traumas in your life, but like, we've been together for 4 hours and you don't even know my last name. So like, I gotta go.
Wait, they said that to you, or you said that to them?
I said that to them.
Like, they're like dumping on her in this situation.
Yeah, because
that's fascinating.
But so like, where does this line of being vulnerable get like crossed? Of like, you can be vulnerable, but when does it become like way too much? And like, clearly he wasn't reading what my reaction was at all.
Ooh,
so
okay.
Getting dumped on is not fun.
You want an educational response?
Yes, I do.
So there is a communication theory, hashtag focus on interpersonal communication in college, that is called, and this is a real live theory that has been published.
Is it called
Huh? Is it what?
Oh, the kitchen sink.
No.
Okay, sorry.
But this is the name. This is the actual name of the theory. It's called social penetration theory. And yes, literally, that is the published name.
That's a soundboard I need. I need a phrasing soundboard.
That's true. With Archer's voice saying it.
Please, yes, of course, it has to.
So the theory is called social penetration theory. It talks about developing deeper intimacy with another person or people using mutual self-disclosure. And so when you enter a relationship with a person, you have to judge how you and how they share information and layers to their, using the ogre reference, their onion. And so it talks about a breadth and a depth of information. So like breadth wise, you'd be like, my favorite color is this, my name is that, my mom's name is this, and my favorite dog is that. I actually really don't like dogs, so I don't know why I'm using dogs so much in this.
Because dogs are better, and you know it inside you. Your subconscious knows that dogs are the superior pet. You're fighting it right now. The deep cats have sat there and whispered in your ears, but it's okay. It's okay.
Anyways, and then depth. Depth is where it gets really interesting, because as you get deeper into things, and so this theory talks about 4 layers. I've seen some people say 3 layers and some people say 5 layers, but superficial layers, that's all of the surface level stuff. And so that's the stuff that's really easy to talk about on a date. But then it gets to like middle layers and inner layers. These are things you might know about yourself, or you might be exploring about yourself. Sometimes they're questions that you're asking about yourself. But then core layers are like pet peeves, morals, values, and then a lot of times stuff that you don't even know about yourself that other people who are very close to you can see. And so some of those things, like if you enter a relationship with a person and you dump it all on them, maybe they're like, cool, I don't mind that, and then they like Daquan, and then they dump it all back on you or something. But
okay. I don't dump it on people. No, because it's like when that situation was very much a weird thing, and even then, a lot of the time is the way I treat it is not like, oh, I'm just sitting there just saying everything, just here's all the stuff. It's more so I'm only gonna, if you ask me a question, I'm gonna tell you the not necessarily the deepest answer, but I'm gonna tell you the answer. I'm never gonna tell you something you don't want to know.
You're gonna be authentic about it.
Yeah.
Like, this is how I feel. This is the answer.
Sure. Yeah. Like, oh, if something happens, I'm like, yo, I hate that. It bothers me. I will be just 100% like right then and there. I'm not gonna. It's more so I won't ever refrain from doing something. Yeah. I'll only sit there. Like,
ooh, that's me professionally, I think. I think in a professional world, if somebody asks me a question, I always tell them exactly how I feel, or like whatever the answer is. Like no sugar. I guess I don't like the term sugarcoat because there's a way to say things, I guess.
Yeah, I used to do that professionally, but I stopped because it just got annoying. And so it's more so, again, I still will do it. It's just that I'm going to basically, and this is kind of always happens. Like, look, I'll give you the answer. It's going to be a lot. If you want to do it, we can do it. If you don't, that's fine. And I usually give that preference of, before I say anything, like, look, we don't have to open this can of worms if you don't want to, but if you want to, I will tell you.
Okay, so how does self-love play into vulnerability?
It is the most important part.
Like, so interesting to me that you said it, Daquan, so fast because of your comment earlier of like, shameful parts, they don't exist. I don't acknowledge them.
I don't, okay, so I probably will sit there and say, if you ever ask me about things that I hate, the biggest thing is that I hate being angry because I am not good at controlling it, and so I just don't, and that's how I deal with it. But if you ask me about it, I'll tell you the things that I'll be like, I've done some terrible things out of anger, and I won't ignore it. I won't run from it. I'll sit there and admit it. But a lot of it is about me being like, okay, understanding my anger, understanding where it comes from, and being knowledgeable about it. I would say that, okay, so, and this is also a product of me living over time. A younger Daquan's very much ideology was, I'm just gonna suppress everything. I'm not gonna feel anything, I'm not gonna do anything, I'm just gonna take everything and just push it all down because that is the most way. I read like a lot of things about like the Greeks and Stoicism and things like that. And that's kind of where I went to. And I did that for a long, long time. And because of that, it's not that like, how can I put it? It's not that like, when I finally come out of it, I very much go through, figure out what's going on and talk about it a lot. Like there's not really anything about me that I will be like, oh, I'm surprised this is there, or oh, I won't say that I'm surprised this is there. It will be like I have an understanding of how I am. Like one of the times when I went to therapy, I was going through and they'll be like, hey, so this was gonna happen. I'm like, yeah, I do this because of this. Like, And it's like, oh, you have understanding. I'm like, yeah, I understand it. I know exactly what's going on. I can't do anything about it right now, but like, this is what it is, you know. I'm trying, and I'll sit there and be like, if I mess up, I'll be like, okay, hey, I did mess up. I'm sorry about that. But back to what I was saying before, the whole point and the whole goal for me is to get to the point where the vulnerability doesn't matter. Self-love is the way to do that. It's to get to the point where I'm going to express myself, and no matter what you say, it doesn't matter. I know who I am, and I love myself, and therefore, I'm okay. And I personally believe that is like the goal that we all should take. And if I ever talk to anyone, that's what I'm always going to promote. I'm never going to sit there like, we can't change anything about the world. It's going to do what it's going to do. The only thing I can do is make you better, and that's what I'm always going to do.
See, can you
No, I don't
ask
wanna be
your
the only
original
one.
question? I can't remember. After that, I can't remember what the actual question was.
Dang, Daquan, you just talking.
What's-
No, I'm just kidding.
How important is self-love and vulnerability?
Oh, invulnerability in general. Okay, yeah. Well, what's interesting for me about that concept is that I, based on these experiences that I've had and like just the amount of just baffledness that I've felt around what people have hidden in, very intimate relationships. And at first it's like really easy to be like, whoa, how the fuck are you here? What are we doing? I don't know if we can cuss, I'm sorry. But
It's okay. They cuss all the time, not me.
All the
I cuss all the time. I know I do. I'm sorry.
No, there's no rating. I made sure that these aren't advertised to children. So
okay,
Thank you. I appreciate that. You're the real one.
But,
Better not bring them kids.
I guess, it's really easy to be like, how can you claim to be vulnerable, showing up authentic in these relationships if you're hiding these like giant parts of you? And that's like a really easy perspective to have. But like when you start to do that like internal work, you kind of like, at least for me, what I started realizing is like, it's really easy for me to be vulnerable with other people that I like love and trust. Like I can have pretty deep conversations, but even as vulnerable I'm being, like I know what I'm not saying and I know what I am saying, and I think the difference when it comes to like self-love is that self-vulnerability of being able to say to yourself those things that you don't say to other people. And that's the part that I personally struggle with. I was joking with my sister earlier today. I was like, just the word journaling just, makes me cringe. Like the hairs on the back of my neck start to stand up because I'm like, I know what I'm not writing down. I know what I'm not, acknowledging or trying to work through or trying to process. And so, that was kind of the takeaway that I've had from these experiences of being like, okay, yeah, other people are out here hiding wild ass shit, but like, what are you hiding from yourself? And like, why are you hiding them from yourself? And like, how is that also manifesting and showing up in relationships? Because it's always easy to see what other people are doing, but like when you stop and try to take accountability for the role that you've played in these type of situations, not to tick for tack, not saying one person did anything worse or better, but like always doing that self-reflection of being like, okay, how did I show up? How was I being vulnerable with myself and showing myself self-love to be able to show up as best I can in this relationship?
I'll add on a little bit to that because I understand your thought process on that, but for me, it's actually the opposite. It's the hardest people for me to be vulnerable to is the people who are closest to me. And it's mainly because I don't want to feel like a burden. I don't want to feel like my emotions or my things are causing the people around me problems. And so like, one of my friends, we basically it's not even like unreal. We both admitted to each other that, look, as long as I'm okay, as long as I have the ability to lie about I'm being okay, I'm okay. like the moment I can't sit there and lie to you to your face and say I'm all right, then that's how you know, oh no, there's a problem. If I can still lie, then we're good. Like it's not really a lie now, is it?
Interesting. I got a question for primarily for you, Nia, but for anybody can answer this. How do you define a big secret? 'Cause that's very relative.
Yeah.
Or if I can rephrase, how do you figure out what is a big deal to somebody who you don't know?
Oh, you can't.
Yes, I agree. You can't just know. But I think it's what people I want to say is what it's kind of, it depends on the person. So I think it's like either it's a big deal because they're like, hey, I'm sitting you down and I want to have this conversation with you, or it's a big deal because they're hiding it. Like it's one of the two, and that's usually how you can tell if it's a big deal to somebody. But you, like Daquan said, you can't just know.
I've been in relationships where like things that I didn't think were a big deal came up, and then they were like, that's such a big deal, why you didn't tell me sooner? And then I was like, I didn't think it was a big deal. But then I've been in other relationships where it's the opposite, and it was like, oh, like I have this thing that I need to tell you, and they're like, oh, that's not a big deal, that's okay. And you know, I feel like there's a big juxtaposition there.
Because it's all dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
Like you can't, what's important to people changes person to person, so you're not going to be able to figure out like, oh yeah, this is the thing that makes this person feel a certain type of way. This is why I just like you just go for it. Like it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. It's like, all right, let's figure it out.
And then where does? Oh no, Allie, talk.
Yes.
When I'm on like a second or third date with somebody, so they've like met the preliminary like qualifications to go on like a second or third date, I'll wait until we've both had a couple of beverages, and then I'll ask them to tell me something I say, tell me something you don't want me to know about you. And then depending on how they answer that, I can like gauge how intimate or unintimate they're being. Like if they're like, oh, I had a dog that died when I was in third grade. Like that's not like a big secret. They're avoiding something bigger and they don't feel comfortable sharing it with me.
What if they don't have anything bigger?
That's smart.
Everyone has something bigger. Everyone has something that they don't want to tell somebody. So depending on how someone answers the question, especially after they've had a couple of beverages.
So I agree with you, Daquan. That is a very you're sneaky. That's very smart.
I was like, that's a good one.
However, you could be shooting yourself in the foot potentially. I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have a deep, dark secret buried in their closet somewhere. However, especially because of the thing that we just talked about, I think you could potentially miss out on somebody just because they don't have anything that they might actually not genuinely have anything that they don't want to tell you.
Or it could be that the thing that you don't think is necessarily important is like the most important thing to them.
Yeah, because like if let's say
you can gauge what's important to them, right? Because like even like what you said, that like explains the hierarchy of what they think is important or not important. How comfortable they are sharing something with you, like how.
Okay, so let's say if I was on a date, so I
write that one down. This
is something that I know about myself. Another point of vulnerability for those who believe in that. If I go
being vulnerable, you just don't care.
If I go on a date with a person, I usually really, really like them. I'm not clingy, but I really, really like them. And if you were to ask me that question, I would probably respond and say, I don't want you to know how much I actually really like you. And some people might get creeped out by that. What would your response be if I said that? If I was like, well, what I don't want you to know is that I really, really like you. Like, I really like you.
I would say something witty like, it's not polite to make a woman blush or something like
Yeah, it sounds like a line. It sounds like a line.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, that sounds like a line. Like, so, because like that would be basically my bracelet. I was like, I don't know. I don't really have anything. Just ask me whatever you want. Like, that's going to be my answer. It's like, whatever you want to know, I'll tell you. I don't have a secret. Like, you're like, what's your deepest, darkest secret? I don't know. Like,
right. Let me catalog them really quick for you.
it's like,
Interesting. Okay. I had one more question, but you really pushing
Look, you
it.
gotta expect these to go longer when you got 4 people talking in this.
I like how you just brought that.
Yeah, I'm like looking
there's
at the
an
time
excuse.
this whole time, like, here's an excuse. I feel like that's valid.
look, man, we got a lot more words to say.
Okay, what other words you got to say?
But what
Wait, ask the question. You have to be done in 5 minutes, so no one can speak. Everyone gets 1 minute and 15 seconds. Sorry.
Okay, so I would say the most important thing to be, you have to be vulnerable so that way you can actually experience things. Not allowing yourself to be vulnerable just hampers your experience. There's no point in not opening yourself up. Yes, by opening yourself up, you're going to open yourself up to a lot more pain, but the equivalent is true on the other side. You'll open yourself up to a lot more joy and a lot more great experiences. And I would rather do that than to not be hurt.
Nia, what you wanna say as our guest, our first guest?
I think I definitely agree with the ending that Daquan had there, and it all starts with loving yourself. And even if you're at a point where you're like not loving yourself, or you have those kind of like self-loathing tendencies or whatever, like recognize you can start wherever you're at, and you can always grow these more. You can grow more vulnerable. You can grow more intimate with other people. Like, you have that power to create whatever relationships you have or you want in your life, because you can always do that inner work. Like Daquan said earlier, like self-love, you can control that. You can't control the world around you by any means, but when you start doing that type of work, I think you start seeing more beauty in life in general.
Wow, that's dope. Allie, final thoughts, Allie?
Yeah, I think my final thought is that intimacy is special, and it is a gift that people share with you. So, when someone is intimate with you, you should take it forward, because I don't think you talked about receiving intimacy at all in this. And I understand that where I said I was on a date and I received too much intimacy quickly, but I still did that person feeling comfortable enough to do that with me, and I think that's the end of that.
And that says a lot, the fact that they're that comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's dope. What I would like to say is, this has been The Real Deal.